Yeah, I mean, I've noticed a lot more people self-publishing their own books too now. Not even just comic books, but just like fiction books. And it's making me lean that way because I write. You know, that's something that I want to get my stories out there. But I feel like publishing companies, every single one of them just doesn't. Half the time they don't want to publish what people send to them, and they send it back and they shut it down. But I think there's so many good stories out there that people want to tell that they just will never put out there because they're afraid to not just do it themselves, and they want to wait for a company to get behind them. And it's unfortunate because I think, like I said, there's a lot of really brilliant creative minds out there that just, unfortunately, a lot of them will never get heard unless they think outside the box and do something different.
Well,
And a lot of it's just about updating the business models. Like
Mm-hmm.
books, especially, you print all the books, then you have to send them off into all the bookstores around whatever nation you got. You could be like, there's thousands upon thousands of expensive text sitting there, and you have no idea because it's just a book on a shelf at that point. There's no reason anyone should pick that up over any other book in that store.
Right.
That's why they are a bit. There's a bit more of a filter there because there's
Yeah.
such upfront cost. Whereas they could update that when it is something done online or pitched to an already existing audience. A lot of that risk goes away because they already know you, they have confidence in what you do and what you make.
Right.
So it's a fundamental problem with the system. They weren't deliberately trying to be sort of an arse about it when they set it up. It was just what they had to do to function there. And I think the issue is none of this updates. Everything moves so slowly when the rest of the world, especially online, is moving so quickly that they just fall behind and
archaic.
don't know how to
the
change.
model is archaic. It's like maybe it did make sense years ago, you know what I mean, and it never caught up. I say this about music all the time, about how, like, even with music, hell, especially with music, it still hasn't caught up to like streaming. Like, nobody knows what the fuck a platinum record actually means now that they're still trying to figure out, well, this many streams, like, you can't quantify that compared to how it was the old. So they're still trying to figure that out. But the model is just, it was old. It just maybe it made sense back in the day, but in the day and age where you have a direct line of sight with your audience, it's, some of that stuff is obsolete. You know what I mean? And thankfully for us, they haven't caught up to that. Like, the old guard hasn't caught up to that, which is why they don't know what the to do. And you got to understand, it's kind of what Razorfish is talking a little bit about, like the job protection stuff. I've talked about this many times before as well, but you got to understand, like, why they're so dirty or so protective of that is that we've seen it. We've seen creatives, I use that loosely, that have existed within the Marvels or the DCs, and have, let's say, tried to go outside of that and done their own thing, and it was a dud. You know what I mean? It's like nobody was interested in it because really they're not interested in it's like the day of the movie star. It's like those days are beyond it. Chris Evans thought he was one, and nobody gives it. You know what I mean? Like, you play Cap, okay, that's great, but you're not Tom Cruise. You're not like, there's not that many of those that exist anymore, that that person can go do whatever, and people are gonna go watch it. Motherfucker make a movie about whatever it is, and people are gonna watch it. Those days are beyond us. And a lot of people that are creatives in the old guard space, they don't have that power to do that either. So their cash cow per se is tying it to something that already exists and is already notable. And that's why they bet so much on that, or bank so much on its protection, because in the event that goes away, they go away. We've seen it. They've tried. They failed at that. There's not a whole lot of people that can leave that situation and do what it is that we've been able to do. And then, not by we, I'm not saying just individually me, I'm saying other independent comic creatives that have seen like solid sales. A lot of them can't go do that. They can't replicate that method because they don't have the pool like that. They only have it when it's attached to their stuff. So that's why they're so protective, because they understand that any event that the jig is up, because some people, and to be expected, are going to be under the law. But once people snap out of that and like people reroute their focus, like, okay, that was there, I don't want that anymore, I'm going over here, they know they're done, because they don't have anything that's comparable aside from just having control of what already has existed and what people already recognize.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the power of the old model as well, like in publishing, it was simply they knew the bookstores and they knew the journalists that would advertise your stuff in mainstream media. Whereas you go directly to the customer, so you cut them out entirely. You could even argue that their connections were sort of just big business talking to each other, and it was only
like
valuable when there was a high street.
stretch yours.
Yeah,
type of situation.
It doesn't benefit the customer at all. Anything in that relationship.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's a whole lot of people that all know each other behind the scenes, all benefiting each other behind the scenes, and it's at the cost of the audience or the creators, that don't have any power, they're standing at the gate going, when do I get let in, or what brass ring do I need to grab to be the next thing? I mean, we've also seen them, they do it all the time. They used to do it all the time. They decide, you know what, this new actor is the star, even if you don't like him. Brie Larson. Yeah, they're like, Brie Larson's the new person. We're like, yeah, but we don't like her. And they're like, well,
you're gonna like her.
We'll shame you into liking her.
You better like her.
If you don't like her, you're sexist.
She's the most powerful Avenger ever.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
I think that's true because of the comic books. And they're like, I didn't ask you what the comic book said. What we told you was she's the most powerful Avenger ever.
Don't forget, if you don't like her, you hate women. So
yeah.
You also hate women superheroes, even though there's a lot of really great women superheroes. Maybe Brie Larson is just annoying and not that great.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
And her character's terrible.
Yeah, we've seen it a lot in media where they decide they want something to get the next thing to get pushed, the next person to get pushed. I used to do it. I used to be a big fan of professional wrestling, and then John Cena came along, and they were like, "He's the guy," and you're like, "I don't like him," and they're like, "I didn't ask. I said he's the guy." I mean, it's just how it is, And now that can't happen because we have not only do we have direct line of sight to people that we actually like, but we also can all talk to each other now. There's mass conversations,
more transparency, and more interactivity.
Absolutely.
But again, they don't have that. It's all smoke mirrors. The fact that you got to get 17 economists to try to get together to see how much a book sold lets you know, which is why like someone would ever dare to try to criticize me for cooking the books. I was like, when has Marvel and DC ever been honest with any of you about what how much books they actually pushing? Why is it that you got Comic-Con and you got these ICV2s and they got to work together to try to crunch numbers? And why? Because they're not giving them to you. You know what I mean? But that's permissible, right? That's okay, and we're supposed to accept their word for it, which is why I say it's bullshit. I think they know that. I think a lot of them know that it's smoke and mirrors. They exist as an establishment because they exist, and nobody actually knows why. It's like, well, it's not that good, you know what I mean? And even the bottom line right now for some of these guys are really hurting. None of this makes sense. Well, it doesn't, and that's the difference, I guess, between what's been happening in these recent years versus in the past, because a lot of people in the past, we just kind of hold our nose and deal with it. Whereas now people are like, well, okay, that doesn't make sense. And I'm going to actually question it. And then if that question becomes something that I want to, let's say, pursue in terms of a solution, I now have the means to go get that done. And now people are starting to act because they're in a position. And this is why I said, look, dude, as it looks right now, all signs point to me seeing a lot of success on the other side of this. But even if I wasn't, I still welcome that world because I thought it was decentralized and then people know where I am philosophically. The fact that, for example, a telephone company they sold off their assets, DC. The fuck does that got to do with any of that? Well, that's the day and age of the mega corporation. But in the event that we got on the other side of this and there'll be a lot of successes, there might not be billion-dollar successes, but I consider this a success. And maybe there's other folks that are in this space that are doing similar things. And there's going to be more of them. Probably they're not all going to be owned by one entity. I, for one, welcome that. I welcome that world, even if I wasn't the one benefiting. I would certainly prefer that over the Disney having as much as what they have, or Fox have, Warner or whatever, AT&T or whatever, having whatever the fuck they have. Why does it have to be that way? It doesn't, but it does benefit them if we keep being under the illusion that it has to be that way. And that's, we're entering into a new age where folks are just waking up and getting up out of that.
Absolutely.
And I think smaller, more distributed success is better. Like, the golden age for the video game industry for me was sort of like the late 90s, early 2000s. And that was a load of people that could get a very small group of people together and make a game that they wanted to make because it didn't exist and they wanted to play it. And that was the perfect thing for them. And then it all moved into mega corporations. The games were far too expensive to make. And so now you've got less games made by fewer people, and everything just becomes a sort of a meaningless mess to get the broadest range of people possible rather than a niche game that people really love. And if you get that with comic books, it's like, yeah, it may not be what a huge Marvel movie would make, but because you're a smaller man band kind of thing, it's still a massive success for you. And that also means that many other people can do it. And now you've got a whole range of comics which can niche down to a target audience and be something that people love rather than something that a lot of people are kind of okay with.
Yeah.
And I think that benefits, again, from a customer's perspective, I think everybody wins.
Yeah. And, you know, that's one of the beautiful things about it, too, is that I think people can really see the difference in something like, you know, a Rippa comic versus a Marvel comic that's coming out these days, because, you know, one is completely just corporatized and everything else, and the other one has, you know, actual soul and heart put into it and everything else. And, you know, people, I think, can just instinctively feel that with
100%.
different stories. So